Arrest, from quiet doubts to a criminal case for years. Harold Shipman looked like the model British family doctor. Neat surgery, calm bedside manner, home visits for frail patients who trusted him without hesitation. That veneer helped him glide past early warning signs. Funeral directors noticed a pattern that didn't fit normal practice mortality. Too many of his patients were dying suddenly, often alone, often shortly after a visit from the doctor, and disproportionately at home during daytime hours. Colleagues recalled how readily he signed death certificates and how rarely he sought second opinions or referred patients for hospital care. At first, such anomalies were rationalized as the quirks of a busy GP with an elderly patient list, until one death forced everyone to stop. Kathleen Grundy, a respected former mayor and active elderly woman, died unexpectedly after seeing Shipman. Soon after, her daughter, herself a solicitor, found a will that disinherited family and left nearly everything to Dr. Shipman. The language, format, and signatures looked wrong. The motive screamed conflict of interest. She went to the police. Investigators secured an exhumation. Toxicology revealed high levels of morphine, inconsistent with a natural death. Police then obtained access to Shipman's computer. A forensic audit uncovered clinical notes altered after patients had died, retrospectively inserting symptoms that would justify a peaceful, expected passing and make a post-mortem seem unnecessary. On 7 September 1998, Shipman was arrested on suspicion of murdering Kathleen Grundy and forging her will. As detectives reviewed other cases, especially sudden deaths of older women, statistical red flags multiplied. Many stories shared the same spine. A visit from the doctor, a rapid decline, an opiate injection framed as comfort, a swift death certificate citing natural causes, and gentle pressure to avoid autopsy. What had felt like scattered oddities coalesced into a chilling pattern of control and concealment. Community shock deepened into fear. If a trusted GP could be a predator, what did that say about safeguards? The arrest didn't end anything. It began meticulous work. Detectives coordinated with pathologists, toxicologists, digital forensic specialists, and statisticians. They mapped timelines, compared dosing records, and matched computer edits to time of death data. Each element reinforced the others. The morphine levels, the falsified notes, the forged document, and the unusual mortality curve within a single practice. That convergence pushed the case over a threshold, from rumor and suspicion to evidentiary solidity. For the public, the key insight is that Shipman's undoing wasn't a dramatic confession or a cinematic slip. It was the slow, disciplined accumulation of incompatible facts, tiny truths that refused to line up, until the only coherent explanation left was criminal intent, cloaked in a healer's white coat. The investigation, dismantling the perfect doctor image after the arrest. Prosecutors structured their case along three mutually reinforcing channels. First, the digital trail. Independent experts demonstrated that Shipman edited electronic records shortly after patient deaths, inserting retrospective symptoms, shortness of breath, terminal decline, that had not been documented before. The timestamps and metadata contradicted any claim of innocent error. Second, pharmacology and pathology. Exhumations and file reviews showed repeated use of powerful opioids, diamorphine, medical heroin, or morphine without robust clinical indications. Many patients were neither in palliative care nor in acute pain. Doses and timing aligned with sudden collapse, not symptom control. Third, statistics. Mortality in his practice was elevated, clustered, and skewed toward deaths at home in daylight hours, a pattern starkly misaligned with comparable primary care populations. The The forged will in the Grundy case added a crucial dimension: motive. Even if a defense argued misjudgment in end-of-life care, falsifying a legal document to capture an estate pointed to deliberate wrongdoing. Witnesses from funeral homes described Shipman's brisk efficiency around death, paperwork, and his discouragement of post-mortems. Family accounts echoed one another. He often asked to be left alone with a patient for a few minutes to settle them, after which the person died peacefully. Individual anecdotes can mislead, but here they harmonized with the toxicology and the computer edits. Prosecutors focused the indictment on a subset of deaths: 15 counts of murder plus forgery, carefully chosen where the evidentiary chain was strongest. In court, jurors saw printouts of altered files, charts plotting anomalous mortality, and expert explanations of opioid kinetics. The portrait that emerged was not of a reckless prescriber, but of a method: isolate the patient, administer a lethal opioid under the guise of comfort, certify a natural death, and retrofit the medical record to close the loop. The strength of the case lay in convergence. When independent disciplines point to the same conclusion, reasonable doubt erodes. For a general audience, the lesson is plain. High-profile trials are often imagined as hinging on a single smoking gun. Here, the smoke came from many sources, and each was tested in the cold light of procedure. Chain of custody, peer-reviewed methods, reproducible statistics. The system worked not because one hero spotted everything, but because different professionals, solicitors, undertakers, clinicians, analysts, each saw a shard of the truth. Put together, those shards formed a mirror in which the perfect doctor could no longer recognize himself. Confession, verdict, and what society admitted. Despite the popular label attached to this phase, Shipman never offered a full confession. He maintained his innocence, and the defense floated narratives of compassionate intent or misunderstood palliative practice. The jury wasn't persuaded. On 31st January 2000, he was convicted of 15 murders and forging a will, and received multiple life sentences. Yet the courtroom verdict was only the beginning of a broader reckoning. A public inquiry led by Dame Janet Smith re-examined hundreds of deaths linked to Shipman's practice. Its sober conclusion: the true toll was far higher than the charges in court. Likely more than 200 victims, predominantly older women who had placed ordinary, reasonable trust in their GP. The absence of a personal confession forced society to pursue a different kind of admission: institutional self-examination. The inquiry scrutinized how controlled drugs were prescribed and logged, how death certificates were issued, how unusual mortality patterns could go unnoticed in a single practice, and how electronic records could be edited without contemporaneous scrutiny. Reforms followed. Monitoring of controlled opioids was tightened. Coroner pathways and triggers for postmortems were clarified. Primary care data analysis was upgraded to flag outliers. Audit trails for electronic health records were improved so that backdated edits became visible events rather than invisible erasures. Shipman died in prison in 2004, leaving no final explanation, no why, to satisfy grief's hunger. In that vacuum, the inquiry's findings provided the only responsible closure. Not a story of monstrous exception alone, but of systems that must be designed to detect rare malice without smothering everyday care. For the lay viewer, that balance matters. Medicine relies on trust. Trust relies on verification. The legacy of the case is not sensationalism, but architecture. Better data, clearer procedures, stronger oversight, and the humility to test comforting assumptions. So when we speak of arrest and confession, the true confession here is collective. It is the healthcare system acknowledging that reverence for professional autonomy, without proportional transparency, leaves quiet spaces where harm can take root. The safeguards built in the aftermath cannot rewrite the past, but they can honor its victims by narrowing those quiet spaces so that kindness and vigilance walk together and the white coat remains what it should have been all along, a symbol of care, accountable to the people it serves,